So I want to share this with y'all. This didn't come in through the portal, but it came in through my email portal. We'll call it a question submission portal. Um, I actually just got this from an agent yesterday. Let me share my screen so y'all can see it. So these are green bean seedlings, and we were talking about, everybody's been struggling to get their green beans up. That's been another popular question on everybody's mind lately. Replanting 2 and 3 times to finally get some good germination. And they were like, "What do you think is going on here?" We're seeing some white growth. It was really near the soil level. There wasn't any of like the white powder substance or anything like that on leaves or even on the rest of the plant. The plants would wilt suddenly, they would never revive. And then a couple days later, they would just turn completely black. And this was her second round planting. And she's like, "What in the world is going on?" And I feel like this is southern blight. And I know the picture is a little fuzzy and we can't see, the mycelium mat that you would expect to see right there at the soil level at the base of the stem with the soil. But I asked the agent, he said yes, that was present when they pulled these up. They did not see any of the sclerotia, those teeny tiny mustard colored balls that we usually see associated with this disease as well. That's it, how it replicates, right? It can just stay in those little balls in the soil, and then when conditions are right, they explode, right? And those mycelium begin to grow. So that's its replication form. But I think that's what's going on here. And so it seems a little early in the year for southern blight. We typically see that when it gets a little hotter. But I feel like all of the pieces were coming together to kind of point towards that. I mean, any other thoughts on green beans and sudden wilting and similar symptoms?
Well, Celeste, if you look too on that image, you can see how the stem's trying to canker as well, and getting darker right there where you ran your cursor over it. So, yeah, I mean, when you started describing it, the first thing I thought of was southern blight. Um, you don't have the orange pustules, what you're talking about, but if you see any of the white sclerotia, but there is something going on of a dampening off there because you can see how that stem's starting to darken up.
Yeah.
Yeah, white rot and southern blight. I mean, we'll see some of those same types of things. I've actually got a southern blight picture of tomatoes. So let's see if we want
Okay.
to point out some of the
Yeah.
um, sclerotium. So this is kind of classic when we're thinking about those, these little mustard seed types of structures. Those are going to be the resistant structures that remain in soil, and that's what makes these sclerotium diseases so challenging, is because that is a much longer longer surviving structure in the soil. And so this is kind of our classic southern blight. With some of the white mold, sometimes you might see more of like a black rather than kind of this brown and a little bit larger structure. So, both of those types of resistant structures as well as the white mold are kind of some of the keys that
Yeah.
we're looking for.
And we have a lot of ornamental plants that are also susceptible to southern blight. So this isn't something, right, that is super specific to, only vegetable crops. I've had it in a number of like I've seen it on daylilies. I've seen it on my goodness, salvia, hydrangea. I mean, the list is extensive. So this could be found on a wide array of things. And then the second question that always comes along with that is, well, what can I do about it? And unfortunately, for homeowners, we don't have any products that are highly effective for southern blight. So in a vegetable garden, what you could do is approach this through rotation. So growing crops like grasses that aren't susceptible to
Sweet
southern
corn. That's
sweet corn.
great. Yeah.
There you go. Grow you some sweet corn on that patch for a couple years before you rotate back to one of these other crops like tomato or beans or peppers, etc., that are susceptible. And then also like deep tillage But the key with dip tillage isn't just mixing the soil, it's actually burying that sclerotia. So we want to get rid of any of the material that's present. Sometimes we even recommend like scooping out, right, the top couple inches of soil if you can, if this is in a contained area, and then turning what's left under very deeply, because burying those little balls that Natalie was just showing us is a way to like kill it. Essentially, it can't bloom when it's buried that deeply. So that's really our only strategies. So
yeah, it's a rough one. When we talk about some of our other soil-borne diseases, Fusarium, Verticillium, we'll have some good ideas about some cultivars that would have some resistance to those. And with with the white molds, with the southern blights, it's very cultural. Solarization actually would be something that we could think about from a homeowner scale. The clear plastic that you're essentially doing the greenhouse effect on your soil and raising that soil temperature to reduce the quantity of propagules of diseases and actually weed seed. So if you're seeing some of those issues early in the season, you may say, you know what, this summer I'm going to take some time off and I'm going to actually do some cultural practices, because when we have warm temperatures, solarization can be very, very effective.
yeah,
Well,
definitely.
I was going to say shovel prune, shovel it up, put it in a plastic bag and get it gone for a homeowner,
Yep,
because
definitely.
those spores will be there in the soil. Shovel prune it, shovel it up around that, throw it in a plastic bag, get it gone.
I like it. All right. What else do we have? Any other kind of timely
We
issues for
should
veg?
probably talk about bacterial stuff. I feel like it's been
Yes,
a fabulous bacterial disease spring.
it certainly has. And I have a good picture of a bacterial streaming that one of our agents took. Do you have any picture? But I don't have a picture of the actual plant. You know what I
Okay,
mean?
yeah, I'll show an older plant image, and then we can talk about that, and then talk a little bit about the streaming. So this is actually one of my peppers from last year. Last year was also a great bacterial disease year, and so this is bacterial leaf spot xanthomatosis disease on peppers. And when we have really, like, if you read the description, it'll be like, long periods of high humidity, and we have pretty much had that for the last 6 weeks or something.
Yeah.
So we'll see issues with bacterial diseases when we have these long periods. And in most instances, this is like an August picture, but it was something that was impacting the plant all through June and July. Lots of times it'll be something that came in on those transplants, because it actually can be transmitted, like it'll stick on the seed coat and actually, come through that transplant process. So we'll see it dragging down yield all through the growing season. And I even had some instances last fall of, having some small fruit infection that then had some secondary, pathogen and breakdown. So it reduces your leaf cover and your productivity. And then you can also start to see some fruit damage too. So copper, things like that can slow it down. But that's bacterial leaf spot on peppers. And then we see now, I know, a lot of spot and speck on tomatoes, which I think is where you were going, Celeste.
Yes, and hold on, let me pull that up. I was caught up in what you were talking about, and then I didn't pull my picture up. Let's see.
Natalie, I thought you were going to mention fire blight. That is probably as bad as I've seen it in a
Oh,
bunch of
Oh,
years.
yes.
yeah,
Oh, yes. Oh, man. Well, we can pull a picture up of that and show that to everybody too.
yeah.
I think I have a good one of that from recently as well. So this photo was taken by our agent Katie Whitbeck. She's in Lawrence County, and she has a lot of tomato growers in that area, and they have just been riddled with a disease this spring. And so she's really stretching her wings and learning all about these leaf spot diseases, wilt diseases. And you can see we definitely have some leaf spotting going on, but in this particular planting, there was excessive wilt as well. And so she decided to do this. It's called a streaming test, bacterial streaming test. And you essentially take a leaf or a stem. Sometimes it's easier if you use a stem and put it in a glass, a clear glass, right, of water so you can see what's happening. And then if you see, can you see they look kind of like these wisps of hair that are coming out of that cut portion of the leaf or the stem? That is an indicator that you have a bacterial disease. And so that helps you kind of rule out fungal diseases, viruses, potential viruses, helps you really narrow that scope so that we know what products would be most helpful to use in those types of situations. And so I thought this was just a really fun, easy diagnostic tool that agents can help you do in the office if you bring a sample in, or you can certainly practice at home. So I wanted
Yeah,
to share that.
that's a cool picture. And let's take this and get like really practical about management, right? This is also a season that is pushing fungal diseases. And so if we got a picture like that, yes, we now know for sure that there are some bacterial disease issues. But that doesn't rule out the fact that we could also have septoria. We could also have some fungal disease.
Just layer them all
Right.
on there.
Right.
Assume that you have them all. Now,
Yeah, yeah. And so of course we don't know the whole plant, so I do not want to assume that there's fungal disease. But if I were thinking about treatment for that particular situation, I'd say, okay, we definitely know we're going to need some copper. We're going to need something that has some efficacy against bacterial diseases, but we may just go ahead and combine that with either, biological fungicide, that has fungal activity, or conventional. And I'll say, so in my own trial plots, it's been slow going this year. And for the first time, I think maybe ever, I actually put on a fungicide treatment on my transplants while they were sitting on the concrete pad waiting to go to the field because I was already seeing bacterial and fungal issues. And so, they got a copper chlorthalonil, spray while they were waiting to go to the field. So I might consider both in those instances. We had a question about like that streaming test. I often do that a lot of times for bacterial wilt when we see, that's the cucumber beetle feeding damage. The melons and cucumbers are a lot of times what I use that streaming test for, but that's pretty cool on spec and spot and stuff too.
Ooh,